I've got a couple housekeeping notes to cover before I turn it over to Tim and Clark. Please note that everyone has been automatically muted and we are using Zoom webinar. As such, all webcams have been disabled except for the presenters. We'll have some time for questions at the conclusion, and you will have a few options on how to ask your questions. One, send me a message via the Q&A to indicate that you would like to be unmuted and you can ask your question verbally. Two, send a message to the Q&A to indicate that you'd like to ask a video question, and I will temporarily enable your video. Three, you can submit a question via the Q&A feature found in the toolbar. If you have any technical difficulties, you can send me a direct message in the chat. And now I'd like to turn it over to our MPI Toronto Chapter President, Tim Whalen.
So welcome, everyone. I want to welcome you to what I think is going to be a very informative 30 minutes. I guess it's no secret that our industry has been crushed. I truly believe that it's extremely important right now for all of our industry associations and advocacy groups to take a really united approach in as we rebuild, as we pick ourselves up. I think there's much more strength in our numbers. Meetings Mean Business Canada certainly plays a key role in that process. MMB Canada has been advocating for the business events industry for a long time now, and I think their work has just intensified in the past few months during the COVID-19 crisis. They've been working with various groups to raise awareness of the impact that the crisis has had specifically on our meetings industry. And we are so happy to have with us today the latest update from the chair of MMB Canada, Mr. Clark Grew. So I'm very interested to hear Clark's updates. He's going to give us a brief update on what MMB Canada has been working on, and then we are going to open the floor for questions. So Clark, I'm going to give the virtual floor over to you.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate that, and thank you for the invitation, Tim, and the introduction. It's great to be here with all of you, sort of be here with all of you digitally. And a big thanks to MPI Toronto for their support of Meetings Mean Business Canada. We really appreciate it, and the coalition has really grown. I'll talk about that in a second. And a special shout out and thanks to Christina Northcott for her support. She's on the MMBC board and does a great job of bringing forward the viewpoint from the meeting planner perspective. And for those of you that don't know much about Meetings Mean Business Canada, it is the board that makes up the coalition's leadership is quite broad. It's coast to coast. It includes meeting planners, speakers, DMOs, venues, associations. It's quite broad. So if you look at our website, you'll see that it's intentionally designed to be a representative body across the country, and certainly one that spans the depth of our industry as we know it. As a lot of other people don't understand it, but we know it, the depth of our industry. So the coalition itself, to give you a feel for it, has been around, actually was stood up after SARS. And so originally the group was stood up after SARS to elevate the importance of business events and meetings and the importance of allowing them to continue, and actually also spawned some of the DMF that we see, these destination marketing funds that we see these days, came out of a lot of the SARS challenge we had back in 2003. So that organization, that coalition that started then, has now become Meetings Mean Business Canada. It is, we have 700 or 800 supporters across the country, and really encourage you to go to the website and just sort of get a feel for who we are. There's some tools on there as well that you may find useful, both COVID and pre-COVID tools. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Because actually when I took over the chair coming out of 2019 and we were looking at 2020 and what would our objectives be as a group, a lot of it had to do with trying to elevate the economic and social impact that business events have in our country. And it's so important and so interesting to try to advocate for this. And basically advocacy is a term, for those of you that don't know, just to educate. So it just means to get out and educate government or the public about who we are, what we're doing. It's not lobbying. Lobbying is a different thing. So those of you that know the term lobbying, we're not a lobbyist organization, we're an advocacy organization. We do partner with the Tourism Industry Association of Canada to do our actual on the Hill in Ottawa lobbying and advocacy work because they have all those relationships on the Hill that really help us. In February, we had our Hill Days where we actually were in Ottawa meeting with ministers and MPs from across the country to basically talk about, under the tourism banner, talk about the importance of tourism. But then our job was really to separate out the meetings industry and talk about its particular economic impact. One of the things I was very pleased about at that stage was that TIAC began to speak about the business events industry as being 34% or generating 34% of our country's tourism. We fought hard to get that comment put in there because it starts to shape how important it is what you do and what we all do across the country to actually drive economic benefit for Canada. So it's not simply tourism benefit, which is very, very important, and we're proud of what we do for the tourism sector. It's also the economic industry support, the opportunities to create new ideas and economic impact that is really, really critically important for our messaging. That was going into 2020, and that was in February. And you know, when COVID sort of hit us all in March, it really shook up everything. As Tim mentioned earlier, we've basically been shut down. The industry's been shut down. And that's been very, very obviously difficult for everybody, difficult for us mentally, all of us in the meetings industry, to not be able to meet physically with each other face to face. So many of us that are in this industry love that and love that aspect of what we do. And basically being told we can't do that has been a shockwave throughout the whole industry, and not just in Canada, of course, but around the world. Because our friends in the United States and Europe and everywhere, we've had a number of joint initiatives with Meetings Mean Business US and India, and many of you would have joined us on April 14th for GMID goes. I was going to say viral, it kind of did, but virtual, and our attempt at the world record. For the largest online conference. So to what's happening now, and to talking about what's happening now. So if we fast forward to today and past the COVID, pandemic announcement and crisis beginning, what we're doing now, the industry has really rallied together. What I've seen across the country is a number of initiatives coming to light to help to deliver joint messages to government, to each other in some cases, but in order to get the industry going again. We're working very closely with the Convention Centers of Canada. I sit on the board of that organization as well, and the Canadian Association of Exhibition Managers. We're also working very closely with them. Both of those groups have task forces specifically designed to address the reopening protocols. So coming up with, looking at what's happening around the world on reopening protocols for events, for public events, mass gatherings, conventions, conferences, exhibitions. Trying to separate out the messaging that those are not the same as sporting events or festivals. They are, as we gather people together as meeting planners, we really do have full control of our delegates. We have control of what they do and how they interact. And therefore, my biggest message to everybody is that should put us in the pole position, or the front position for opening first, instead of the back end of the bus, was where we're sitting in many cases today. Especially with the announcement out of BC that they wouldn't open for conventions until a vaccine was distributed broadly. In addition to those groups, TIAC also has a task force that is more tourism across the board, has a great task force, which we've been feeding information in through the business events people we have on that task force, including Barry Smith and Kathy Pugh. And so they have been working hard to elevate again the events component of tourism, and they've done a great job. TIAC's done a great job of actually pulling together a paper on how we can actually reactivate the industry. Air Canada has also pulled together a leadership roundtable and are writing letters into the Prime Minister and other ministers, as well as I believe publishing an article in the Globe and Mail coming up soon to talk about our industry and talk about how important it is to the economy and opening it up. And then I meet every so often with the provincial tourism associations as well, along with Barry Smith, to maintain awareness of the business events industry and separating it out again from leisure tourism, which is a big part of what Meetings Mean Business is all about. So Tim, maybe I'll stop there. I don't want to ramble on because I know there's lots of talk these days about Zoom fatigue, and I don't want to just sit here and put everybody to sleep. So Tim, maybe if you can come on in and maybe we can have a conversation.
For sure. I think that's a great update. That was a great synopsis of what's going on at a high level. But we can open the floor up now to questions that come in. I know I have a few. So maybe we'll start with a few of the questions that I have, and we can continue on with participant questions. But one of the things that I see is that every industry obviously has experienced a shutdown right now and is hurting. And every industry considers themselves to be of top importance for the government and as far as recovery and reopening. How do we get across the magnitude and the importance of the meetings and events industry so that we don't just get lumped in with every other industry?
Yeah, it's a great question, Tim, and one that we all need to do together. So absolutely, as you said in the beginning, working together on this is so important. The federal government came out early and talked about the tourism industry being hit the hardest. And in the government's mind, business events fits inside of the tourism envelope. So for them, they've got us buckled in there. And they're absolutely right. I mean, we've been the most shut down, the most closed, and basically our taps of business were turned off instantly without warning. And so really that message through Minister Jolie at the federal level has been received and has been really propagated by her and by Charlotte Bell at TIAC and so on, that this industry is on its knees. So let's make sure we're aware of that. So I believe that the federal government and provincial governments, to differing degrees, do understand that. I think the Prime Minister said between tourism and oil and gas at the time, those were the two most devastated industries in the country. Now we have tourism as the one that will, and business events on tourism being the one that will come back the latest. So that's the other piece of the message, is within tourism, business events actually can't get going until the regulatory structure is in place for us to meet again safely. And so we're pushing that as much as we can, Tim. And that's very much at the provincial level, because the regulatory, remembering that the federal government level is focused obviously on opening borders and funding, and that's what you've seen, the focus for them. Whereas the rules of the road for opening for larger events is provincial. So we're dealing with provincial pieces there, which most are basically under the guide of the lead health organization in each province.
Excellent. We've got a few questions coming in on the chat. One that kind of attaches to what we've just been speaking of from Stuart Hall. He's asked, how receptive is government to the idea that business events are lower risk than sporting events to the public?
Yeah, great question. Is that Stuart? Yeah, great question.
Hall,
and we are trying hard, Stuart. Unfortunately, it's been our role for a long time to elevate the idea that business events are even their own industry. So for us to be then segregating that out from sporting events is difficult. There's no question. They put us into this mass gatherings sort of bucket and throw us all together. So one of the most important messages that we need everybody to help on is helping government understand at any level you might have influence or have networks, a social network, whatever platform you have. When business events happen, they're done in a controlled fashion. We can control the environment entirely. We can control how our delegates interact. We can control who comes into a conference live. So it's not a free-for-all where you sell a ticket and whoever owns a ticket comes in. We actually have the ability to not that we, it sounds awful to say manage our delegates, but we do it all the time. We know who they are. So that, Tim, that part of it for us is really important. We get that out there in whatever platform you have. I'll just point to quickly. There was a CBC article this week. I'm not sure if anybody saw it, but it's posted on CBC, and it actually started to talk about our industry uniquely as an actual industry, which was a huge win for us all. So if you can find that one, it's a great article.
Yeah, I read it this morning.
Not uplifting, but it's good because it actually starts to talk about us as an industry. So we need those platforms, those messages, Stuart, in order to change the conversation. It's a slow go, and we need everybody to help us do it.
I have two questions, one from Sandra Moniz and one from Daryl Foster, both kind of hit on a similar topic. So basically, Sandra asked, my question for MMBC is what type of advocacy is being done or can be done to help kickstart our venues and hotels pre-vaccine? And Daryl, along the same lines, has asked, has there been any discussion with the province of Ontario in regard to gathering restrictions as we move through the phases of reopening?
Great, thanks, Daryl, and hello, Sandra. It's nice to hear your name, and can't see you, but I'll talk to my little ET camera here as if it's you. Nice to see you in the chat box. So first off, these task forces that are formed, both the Convention Centers of Canada and the CAEM, the exhibition managers, are both focused heavily on exactly that. What could we put in front of government that will give them comfort? Because the most important thing we have to remember is government is not going to just open things up if they don't feel like people can be healthy and safe. So we have to give them every assurance that what we do is safe. And that's where it goes back to the other question around separating this out from other types of events. So it starts there, so we can start to say, this is how facilities can be operated and run. Well, everything from intake of delegates to how we clean the building, how people interact, how we serve food, how we do our particular plenary sessions and breakout sessions, all the detail around that. There's some really great people on these task forces that are either leading our convention centers and facilities or are heavily involved in either setting them up or putting on consumer shows and exhibitions, who really technically understand this really well. They're bringing that forward. The other piece of it I'll just mention before I move on to the Ontario piece is that as you look around the world, you see various other standards being set, or you see Germany opening up for exhibitions. Germany made the first bold move to separate exhibitions from mass gatherings, which was really good for our industry, and that helps. But we think the real money shot is to have our industry professionals across the country come forward with, we can do this. Canada has a way to do this. Canada is extremely professional in how we do this, and then delivering that message upwards from there.
So quickly sorry to interrupt, but as far as an individual event, meeting an event professional, is that where we can help, is to get that message out that we are a different breed? That's probably Absolutely. First and foremost.
Yeah.
Just to try and get that separation from mass gatherings.
Yeah, absolutely, Tim. And I think that's going to be really critical. You'll see a few things come out in the next week here as these task forces come forward with some recommendations for government. And remember, and so yes, so absolutely, as you see that, follow me, follow MMB, follow through MPI, Christina, and you should start seeing the flow that is happening. But we need everybody. We need everybody's networks and you liking things and sharing things and putting thoughts out. And if you find things, please, by all means, post them, share them, send them to me personally. I get a lot of stuff from across the country, and it's great. And of course, what we're trying to do is not be noisy, but be focused and be deliberate in our message, so that when we send a message to government, it's heard. And then remembering, and going into Daryl's question a little bit, Tim, each province is different. So each province is handling the reopening protocols slightly differently. And we have people across the country in constant conversation at the highest level. So Scott Beck, Scott Beck is the CEO of Tourism Toronto. and Lorenz is the CEO of the Metro Toronto Convention Centre. Both of them are in constant discussions with the provincial government in Ontario about how to do this safely. So it's absolutely, the channels are there, and everybody wants the same thing. So this is where we really come together. We all want to see, well, I believe we all want the same things. We want to be able to work again and to do events. But I think we all also are very cognizant of it being safe, it being healthy, it being in ways that we will not, see another spike in COVID-19. So I think everybody I talk to in our industry is of that mindset, Tim, and we need to get that message together. But yes, there's many channels happening right now.
Now, a couple of messages from Ann Finzer and Lisa C, but I'm going to, just for time's sake, kind of merge them into one another. Are the provincial governments aligned in their work and their decision making to reopen facilities? And are areas of the country where there are not as many COVID cases, could they possibly be ahead of the curve in reopening and rebuilding their economies?
Yeah, thank you for that, and hello, Lisa. Again, good to chat with you. So, it's a great question, Tim, because you have hotbeds, obviously, of the crisis. I was talking to Perrin Beatty this morning. We're going to shoot a video this afternoon. He's the president of the Canadian Chamber, and obviously Toronto is a difficult spot. So it's a hotbed. Calgary has been a hotbed, but then speaking to Newfoundland, they haven't had a case in 2 weeks, and Winnipeg, Manitoba has controlled it very well, and BC seems to be on the back end of it. So you really do have situational components that do have to be respected. At the same time, I think when we're bringing forward recommendations on how to reopen, I don't think we'll be saying, here's how we reopen and open the country on September 1. Like, I don't think we're putting a hard date on anything. It's listen, we can do this. We're ready. We're capable. We're professionals, and we can actually do this professionally. And then I'm going to project it'll be province by province, and maybe even to some extent, city by city within provinces. I'm not sure it's necessarily always just going to be a blanket. It may be, but I think, for instance, Toronto versus London, Ontario could be two very different scenarios. I just pulled those out of the air, so I don't.
Still
really
has
know
to be a bit difficult. The nature of our business is people traveling from different areas. So even an area of the country that maybe has no cases, you hold an event there, and all of a sudden people are coming from said hotbeds. It's the nature of our business kind of works against us in that way a little bit.
It really does, Tim, and that's an interesting one too, because even crossing provincial borders is, now you're talking about a delegate confidence, and that's another level of this that needs to, like, once we get to opening, great, we can open, we have all the rules and all the proper protocols in place. Will delegates come? What will their experience be? Would they rather just go virtual this year? Like, there's all those challenging questions for meeting planners that make it quite complicated. Yeah.
Well, I actually have a question from Margaret Binns. She's asking, is Meetings Mean Business Canada involved in any way in creating messaging to planners that they can share and encourage their delegates to calm fears or encourage attendees?
Yeah, thank you, Margaret. Yes, and we've been so we've moved into sort of the content development side. I'm not sure if some of you will have seen some of the videos we did last year on. There were some great vignettes on sort of the impact of what business events mean to different people in the community. We're actually in the middle of, and I've shot a few of them, the then and now videos. So we're shooting some videos around with some of the folks that were in them last year, speaking so highly of how important is this to their business and how it grows, to now being shut down. And so I hope they aren't discouraging. I think they're very real. And the intention of them, of course, is to be able to share with government the impact this is having deep down in the roots of our industry. And then, there's a few other planned sort of discussions we're doing, interviews we're doing that are focused, about talking about the industry and so on, like the one I'll do with Perrin Beatty this afternoon. But that's where we've gone with content. And then the other element of content for us has been to try to collate these different task force groups and feed through as much information as we can, both to our audience, which is all of you, but also up to government. And they're two very different audiences. MMBC has over the years talked a lot to ourselves. We've talked, we're good at this in the event industry. We talk to ourselves all the time, and because we're the funnest group out there, so of course we talk to ourselves. But then trying to grab that and re-engineer it to talk outside the industry is really what we're focused on now. It's trying to get people who don't necessarily see us as a different industry to see us that way.
Right. And
hopefully that answers the question kind of.
Yeah, and that kind of leads in. Teresa Gatto has asked a question that kind of leads off of that. In developing a measurable set of standards and opening protocols, do we wait for the government to provide that to us, or is that up to us to provide the standards to the government for approval?
Well, we don't want to be on the back foot on that, right? So right. What we're doing with the task forces is really to come up with those protocols. And like I say, within the next week, those should be pretty much done. So this work has been going on for the past few weeks on protocols on how we would conduct safe meetings. Now, how each province will accept it, interpret it, will still be up to them, of course. We can't control it, but we want to inform it. The last thing we want to be doing is not informing, and again, being invisible in their minds and not being able to get a message out that, hey, this is a highly professional industry that knows what they're doing and is good at it, right? So and doesn't want any health issues either. Like in the past, when you'd have an event and you'd have someone get sick at an event, it's the last thing you want as a meeting planner, right? And so we don't want that happening going forward.
Right. I have a question. The name is this from Stephanie Kababi. Is there any anticipation of what year people are going to feel comfortable I guess not sure if you can answer this, Clark, but when people will still feel comfortable again planning large events, like a number of associations are nervous about even 2021. I guess maybe a time frame of when you see, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but this thing opening up again.
Well, thank you for all the guards and the blocks, Tim, because this is the big question, Stephanie, and it's a good question. We're all asking it, and I think probably I would suggest from everything I'm hearing, don't expect a light switch approach. It's not going to happen. Boom. Okay, we're back. It's going to be a dimmer switch approach, if you will, right? Where you're going to see your local, you're going to see your corporate events start to come back. You're going to see the ones that can be controlled in a lower number of delegates in a larger space, so that there's room to do some social distancing, hybrids, all that. I think that is really what we're going to see probably through 2021. I've seen lots of different stats. When are we going to get back to 2019 numbers? Canada was on track to break all sorts of records this year for business events. We were going to have a great cross country showing on business events, and that's vaporized. So now we're looking at the 2019 watermark and saying, when are we going to get back there? I think there were some wishful thinkers early days that said 2022. I'm not sure we'll get there till at least 2023. And it, and may I say, caveat that, a huge caveat, depends on all sorts of things. We get out of this clean and they've vaccinated and everybody's good. Maybe we do have a light switch. We come out of it and we have an issue or some issues globally. I think that's a whole different scenario. The one thing I would just add to it, Tim, quickly, is that remember that a lot of our delegates come from the international marketplace, and international travel. The confidence in international travel is going to be very fascinating. I think that's a human dynamic that we're going to have to recognize. It's going to be difficult to get people to move around the world as easily as they used to. And certainly on a corporate dollar, corporations aren't going to be as comfortable sending their people and taking the risk that they could go into another country and catch COVID there. So there's you know, I think there's some really important concerns around it. Hopefully that's not too depressing.
Yeah. I'm not sure you could avoid that at this time, right? The depressing news. So
Yeah.
Carol Priest has written in, and I'll just summarize her question. But Clark, is Meetings Mean Business focus more on advocacy for the industry in general from a high level, or is there any kind of advocacy being done for event professionals at an individual level, say for the CERB or any loss of income, any advocacy that may be done for individuals, I guess?
Yeah, and I guess so. MMBC is definitely was always definitely focused on advocacy to the federal government. So that's where we started. That was our main, you know, our main mandate, you know, really until we've been pulled into the provincial with the regulatory side, has been advocate to the federal government, help them understand how important this industry is. And frankly, one of our most until March of 2020. Our biggest ask of the federal government was always make sure that within the Destination Canada marketing envelope, you are putting significant dollars into business events marketing. And so, and we moved the needle there. And like last year, we got increased significantly. We were happy with that. That was our main push, was to make sure that our Crown Corporation promotional agency was promoting bringing business events here. So all this has shifted. and now we've got lots of people, you know, asking for different things. I think to hit it very targetedly, Tim, on that question, I believe there's lots of individuals, businesses, SMEs who are in need of help, and not necessarily simply financial help. So, and I mean, obviously that's critically important, so don't hear me wrong, but other help. And how do you now re-strategize your business? How do you now rethink your business? Perhaps looking at ways to work together in partnership differently, ways to combine efforts, ways to merge. There's lots of different things starting to happen in the industry. You'll start to see it where the competitors are starting to work together. I think that's smart. And I also think as we come out of this, there's going to be new opportunities, different opportunities. And I encourage all our planners to think about that. Think about what the opportunity could look like in your space. The healthcare sector, technology, the food space, transportation, these industries are going to take off. They're going to be critically important and grow dramatically coming out of COVID-19. What can you do around that? What can you do as a meeting planner? So I don't know if I'm answering it dead on, but MMBC does not have a facility to consult on that, if that's what I'm hearing.
Right. Well, and I looked at the clock now. It's 12:33, and the half an hour just flew by.
Sure did.
But I think you've provided us with some amazing information there.
Good.
I know personally for me, I knew bits and pieces of it, but you managed to really fill in the gap. So I want to thank you for spending some time with us in our chapter. And I think the big message I took away from that personally is, on an individual level, there's a lot we can do to step up through conversation and social media to really inform people, as MMB Canada does, about our industry being different from a lot of the rest, so we don't get lumped in with other industries, associations, and businesses. Yeah,
absolutely, Tim. Thank you so much for having me. It's very weird, everybody. I can't see you, but it's great to know you're out there. Stay well, stay strong, stay together. You know, the more we can work together on all we're doing, the better, the stronger we'll be at the back end. So thanks, Tim, very much for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Clark, and thank you everyone for participating. I know we got to most of the questions. A few we didn't get to. We probably could have went on for a couple hours with this session.
Anytime.
So maybe we'll have Clark back in a month.
Sounds good.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.